white boy!
Hello everybody, how are you doing? I hope you're having a good Sunday. Today I'm going to be talking about my Rograhk and Silas Seeker Adept Commander deck. There is a link down below to the Moxfield list if you'd like to look at it there also, but I would like to talk about some of the things in this deck and sort of where my head's at with it. So the point of this deck is it's a Polymorph deck, if you don't know that spell. It will essentially replace a creature you have in play with one from your deck. Revealed from the top of your library so you can manipulate it, but if you haven't, it's random. So that being said, this deck pilots by having Rograhk in play whenever you need a creature for anything, with any of the commander synergy or legendary creature synergy, and obviously having something to polymorph in the first place. Silas is more there for colors, but him being a death touch blocker, and he will cost 3 mana when Rograhk costs 4 instead. So it's not always bad to have him there. Very good pairing. Other than that, we're going to get right into the lands, and I'll discuss more about the deck as we go through it. And what's up, guys? One more thing before we get started. I just wanted to say that this video and this list is mostly supposed to be like a guidebook for the strategy rather than exactly how to play the deck or how to build it, I should say. It's supposed to just be like, this is mine, make yours. I think this deck has a lot of room for interpretation. I think this deck has a lot of room for cuts, and otherwise, I think the strategy is very prolific, being as though the strategy is not really in the command zone, it's in the deck. So if there's anything you don't want to play, if you want to make it more casual, if you want to make it more budget, this is just supposed to be the seed, because at the end of the day, all the best creatures in the deck are a couple bucks all together, and Polymorph is, I think, less than $1 last time I checked. If I'm mistaken on that, Transmogrify is less than $1. So very much so, take everything you see in this video with a grain of salt, but this is my shell, and I think that it is a very good shell for the deck, and I don't think and see a better commander pairing than this. All right, thank you. As far as our lands go, there's only 3 that are incredibly crazy that you might not know of or expect. And these are the man lands that produce colorless. I like these because they don't come into play tapped. And then colorless, while we are playing a 3-color deck, I've never really been bit in the butt for playing these, because these are the only lands we play besides Ancient Tomb, spoiler alert, that produce colorless mana. And we have plenty of rocks to thin out the herd, and we don't really have any spells that are too intensive on devotion cost. But getting right into it, the whole point of these is where if you don't have Rograhk for any reason at all, Drannith Magistrate, and he's just been board wiped a bunch, you can at any moment have these lands become a creature to polymorph. And I think having that added layer of consistency to it makes them very strong. I do think that they are worth playing. You don't really give up much by doing it, but I would definitely play these lands. A lot of this list is going to be hearsay, what I like. You might not like what I like, and that's okay. But I do highly recommend these 3 lands. I think that they will surprise you with their effectiveness of something to give you to polymorph. And then other than that, we're just going to get right into it. Like I said, there's nothing too crazy in this deck. We got a couple of basic mountains, a couple of basic swamps, and a couple of basic islands. Now we're just going to go down the list. Shouldn't be any lands that are too crazy from this point forward. But City of Brass, of course, you could replace this with Mana Confluence, or I'm sure this is the cheaper one, so that's why I have that one. Command Tower is obviously Command Tower. Baradur, you could play the other cycles of these lands if you were so inclined, but I like this one. It enters tapped unless we control a legendary creature, like just the cycle goes. We can have Rograhk on a whim, just decide to have Rograhk, and I doubt anyone would counter him. So we'll always get this as just a swamp, but in the late game or at any point in the game, if a creature dies and you have mana open, then you just get to amass orcs. So I do like playing this card. I think it's fun. It hasn't really won a game by itself. Maybe that's sample size or what have you, but I like incremental advantage for my land base. And we just got some pathways here. I think black is one of the more important colors in our deck. So I just sort of play the pathways. Polluted Delta gets me blue and black. Prismatic Vista gets any one of our basics that we have. Mount Doom, because we can play the One Ring tech synergy on it, and it's untapped, makes colors. Fiery Islet. Having a bunch of lands isn't super important with this deck. Obviously, it's a case-by-case basis, but I think I'm trying it out to sacrifice and draw a card. I think might be important than just keeping around the land. Ancient Tomb, Polymorph, Transmogrify if you decide to play it. There's a lot of colorless in this deck, so I think Ancient Tomb rounds off the deck quite nicely. I think it fits very well, even though our deck is 3 colors. We have a Watery Grave, of course, Steam Vents, of course, the 3 dual lands that go for our colors. Oh, and Valgavoth snuck his way into the the lands. But Valgavoth being shown here, we're going to get into the creatures and what you are aiming to polymorph into. So I guess from this point into the creatures, we're going to start with Valgavoth. I have never actually had a game yet because I don't get to play as much as I want. I doubt any of us do. But I haven't had a game where I just sort of like fast rolled into Valgavoth. But I like the idea of it. It makes decks that rely on instants and sorceries have to load you up. And then if they have to kill it, it does die to removal, of course. But I think he's very strong. I think as the game progresses and he is not dying and you have counter spells and ways to protect him, I think that he could swing a lot of games in your favor if really not that much synergy put into it. This card, don't play this card. I play this card because it's a different video in and of itself why I bought this one. But I play it because it's silly and I got serial numbered. Don't play this card, but I think it's super fun, and if you want to have it as an homage to me, then play it. But I don't play it. Don't play this card, I promise. We have Jin-Gitaxias Core Augur, probably, undoubtedly, unmistakably, the best creature to polymorph into. Even if your opponents just kill him at sorcery speed, you get to draw 7. Where do you go wrong from that? There's no downside to polymorphing into this other than sometimes he just dies. But hopefully their removal is at sorcery speed. They have to board wipe entirely. And you just get to counter their spell. Because since you've drawn 7, it gives you a big chance to draw 1. We don't play the most in this deck, but we play enough to where maybe as the game progressing, hitting a tutor or 2, drawing 7 cards, you'll probably hit 1. We have Tidespout Tyrant. A super great card. It definitely, we lost our infinite mana outlet with the banning of Mana Crypt with this card, but I do still like the spirit of this card, and I like to try and make it work still. I say that like it's a bad card. It's a very strong card. It always does something when I play it, and it just has shown out for me time and time again. I very much love playing this card in this deck. It's very cheap. Maybe not this version of it, but it's very cheap. I think it's worth trying. Jin-Gitaxias Progress Tyrant is probably my favorite version of Jin-Gitaxias. I just like the idea of slowing our opponents down while also getting ahead. One big creature. Sometimes people make mistakes. Spells get countered that they forget to throw one away. I think it's a very good way to keep everyone's head on a swivel, and getting it sooner than you're supposed to can really make the game snowball away. Like if you get a polymorph with this guy and then untap with him, and you have something like a Demonic Tutor in your hand or Beseech the Mirror in your hand, crazy card. Hullbreaker Horror is in this deck for the same reason as Tidespout Tyrant. It's a little better at protecting itself, being able it can return spells to the owner's hand. It's a lot better at protecting itself. But it does not bounce lands, so that's a downside of it over Tidespout Tyrant. But I do think it's worth it to play both of them easily. Shieldred, The Whispering one, I play this one kind of for fun. It's also like in the later games, sort of the more value piece kind of games where maybe a Hullbreaker Horrors died when the Jin-Gitaxias have died before. It allows you to remove opponents' creatures while simultaneously reviving some bombs. So I think it's fun to play. This deck has some very powerful cards in it, but it's not supposed to be my most competitive deck by any means. Just a fun deck, and this is one of those cards that I like the concept of it being inside the deck, but I would not be mad if anyone took this out. So I'll just go ahead and say I think Valgavoth is really good. I think Jin-Gitaxias is very good. And I think that these two are kind of joke cards, generally speaking. But these 5, if you're only going to play 5 creatures, I'd probably play these. Although I have not tested Valgavoth. But you don't want to play too little creatures. And I'll get into why that will be the case. But next, we're going to get into the sorcery section of the video. Alright, man. So we got into the sorcery section of the video. We're going to start off with our boy Polymorph, being as though it's the whole thing of this deck. It's what you're trying to do as soon as possible. There's a red version of this card that is functionally, but not identically, the same as Polymorph. It's called Transmogrify. If you'd like to play both, you may. I'll get kind of into why I don't play both, and you could disagree with it because I could very well take out Mind Leech Mass. So yeah, I did just say it was a bait, not being silly. So I would probably encourage you to play Transmogrify if you're going to choose these commanders as the helm of the deck. But this is obviously the meat and the potatoes of the deck. It's 3 and a blue. Swap Rograhk for any of the bombs I showed you. Beseech the Mirror is very good. We play a ton. Unfortunately, we cannot sacrifice Rograhk to this. It needs to be a token. But we play a lot of enchantments. Well, more enchantments than you think, but definitely a ample amount of mana rocks to sacrifice to Beseech the Mirror, which this then becomes an additional copy of Polymorph, such as what Transmogrify would be. But then you could just argue, oh, well, my Beseech the Mirror is a 3rd Polymorph, which I would not be mad at you for saying. But it also allows you to get things like Damnation, Toxic Deluge, and anything else if you want. It's a very versatile card. As a lot of play, you could probably put cards in the deck just because you play Beseech the Mirror to help with some matchups. Damnation, because you're not always the one ahead of everyone else. You can't really argue against Damnation in a control deck. We got Ponder for some cantripping. These are a little out of order. Siphon Mind, just because I like the card. This deck is definitely still a control deck. I like the idea of Harmonize that makes everyone discard a card. One of those incremental value things. I'd rather have Siphon Mind get countered than maybe some of the other things that exist. You definitely take it out. I just like the card. I think it's fun. Faithless Looting is a good kind of cantrip. You can flash it back. Does all sorts of good stuff. Jessica's Will. We have Rograhk being 0 mana, so obviously that's sort of where some of the power of it comes from. It's very seldom that you won't have Rograhk to this, because even imagine this, you play Rograhk on turn 1, he gets killed, you play him on turn 2, and then turn 3 you can still Jessica's Will with your commander. So all things considered, it sort of comes together very nicely. Then we have Gitaxian Probe, just being able to look at the blue player's hand, and cantrip itself, you can't underrate this card. This is very good. It's 0 mana, and yeah, just other than that, it's good. Night's Whisper for some good mana efficient card draw. Sorry, some technical difficulties, but Night's Whisper, not much to talk about. We play Wheel of Fortune because sometimes you just need to get whatever card someone demonic tutored out their hand. We play a good bit of fast mana, low to the ground cards. Not the optimal fast mana, but some good stuff. And, just refilling your hand after you've played out a bunch of stuff, and maybe you went for a ballsy Polymorph, and now you just need a new grip, or you just really are fishing for some counter spells. It definitely is a good card. It's expensive for a reason. I definitely love playing this card in the deck. I don't think I could take that out. Yawgmoth's Will. This card surprises me. Everyone knows this card is good, but nobody really talks about it or goes into maybe why, although we kind of know why. This card surprises me. Sometimes I look at this card and I think that it costs too much. Not that it costs too much, per se, but it just feels like you won't ever get that much out of it when you play it for the 3 mana that it costs. In this deck, I definitely felt that. I wanted to try it out, but I get surprised time and time again from this card. And just think about all the cards we discarded from Wheel of Fortune. We could play them again if we draw into Yawgmoth's Will. This card, like I said, surprises me. I very much like playing it. I don't think I'll take it out. And yeah, it just makes me happy. So it's in here. Preordain for some more cantripping. Sorry to be jumping around all the place, but it's just sort of how the cards played out. Demonic Tutor. It's Demonic Tutor. It's sort of just like a power level decider of a deck, how consistent your deck is. You know, blah, blah, blah. You get to the end of it. Gamble is kind of the same thing as Demonic Tutor. I wouldn't be mad if you don't play this. I usually don't play Gamble in anything, really, no matter how like competitive per se my deck is supposed to be. I just don't like the card fundamentally. I always feel like I'm going to get stinked on, and I usually end up doing something else just so I don't get, you know, bamboozled by my own card. But polymorphing is so imperative, and it is so powerful at the chance of running into your Jin Gataxias that I think I just have to nut up and play it for this deck. I think this deck is a special kind of monster. It's more of a lottery deck, so we might as well lean into the lottery. And then Windfall, same thing, same reasoning as Wheel of Fortune. Sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse. What are you going to do? Windfall is pretty nice. And then next, we're going to go into artifacts that produce mana. All right, so the artifacts that produce mana, I try to put the cool one in front. Mox Amber is Mox Ruby, which if you don't know, it's like a multiple $1,000 card banned in Commander. But being as though Rograhk is still red, even though he has no mana cost, Mox Amber is active on turn 1. So it's essentially a Mox Ruby. And then when you play Silas Seeker Adept, which this can pay for the colorless and his cost, all the same, you then have Mox Grixis Thing, a card that doesn't exist. Essentially a rainbow Mox for no downside to you, other than you had to cast your 3 mana commander. So definitely this is imperative. If Rograhk is going to be your commander, I would get this above anything else. And obviously you need Polymorph, but you know, Polymorph's a couple cents. This card is not. So Lotus Petal needs no introduction. Quick manas. Midnight Clock, I just kind of like this card. You can take it out. But getting a new hand sometimes does come in handy. We got Talisman of Indulgence and Talisman of Dominance. I didn't really put too much thought into which talismans I played. You want to play, I believe, Creativity is the other one. Although I do think I have that. Yeah, actually, I'm crazy. I have all the talismans. I think it's worth it. Pentad Prism is nice because it allows you to, you know, if you don't know what it does. Sunburst, long story short, if you spend 2 different colors of mana, it gets 2 counters on it. You can remove a counter from it for a mana of any color. It sticks around even when there's no counters on it. We can sacrifice it to Beseech the Mirror. It's not the best 2-mana rock that's ever existed, but I think sometimes skipping ahead and being able to have an extra mana over another mana rock while still having something to sack to Beseech the Mirror, I think makes this card worth trying. And it's an experiment play. Just let me know if you play this card or if it's complete trash. Just let me know what you think. Soul Ring, of course, I'll play it as long as it's legal. They should ban it. That's just me. Arcane Signet, obviously. Chromatic Lantern will help fix up any mana color problems you have, which you shouldn't really have, but why not? Felwar Stone, you could play 3 colors. Obviously, the more colors your deck has, the more chance this has of working. It hasn't really let me down yet. So those are just all our artifacts that create mana. Now we're going to go into artifacts that do stuff. Stuff and things. So this pile isn't super big, but I think important. Proteus Staff. This is sort of the reason why I don't play Transmogrify in the deck, is because we also play Proteus Staff, and it's why you want a couple creatures. Because you could definitely build a version of this deck that only plays Jin Gitaxias or something, the 10 mana one, so you get it every single time. But I like the idea of Proteus Staff being in the deck and being able to recurrently get a new threat every turn, or perhaps just letting it cool off. Make them deal with one threat at a time. Next time, when that creature dies, Proteus Staff up the next one. And you're sort of able to just do this on a whim to the point where I don't feel like you need both. Maybe you could use both if you want to go for the high roll at the same time. But I like the style of play that Proteus Staff allows the deck to have. And I do think that it is a skill gap in playing and piloting the deck. I think how you use your Proteus Staff, I think, separates the boys from the men in this deck. Isochron Scepter, busted ass card, doesn't need too much introduction. You just kind of want to put a counterspell on this bad boy and wait, profit, or you can put something else. I mean, it's any instant that costs 2 or less. So, viewer discretion. The One Ring, this goes in every good deck. This is one of those decks that arbitrarily decides the power level of decks. Being able to protect yourself, gotta love it. Lightning Greaves gives our big old baddie Shroud for 0 mana once you've developed the boots. Super worth it, allows you to not have to squeak in an extra mana with something like Swiftfoot Boots. And you're not really going to be targeting your own big guy, It's not like we're keeping a guy hexproofed and to polymorph him. No, I want to protect my big fellas. And we have Camille, the Inner Sun. This deck is full of tutors, little cantrip draws, and just good cards in general. So being able to discover 5, if not keep the card in your hand, is always super good. And your spells can't be countered. I think it's worth trying out. I like this card. I think it's just a fun card. But you could take it out and nothing would really change. But I have fun playing it. All right, next we're going to get into instants. All right, so being as though our commander is 0 mana, there would be no surprise in me playing Deflecting Swat, Fierce Guardianship, and Deadly Rollick. This is a placeholder for my Deadly Rollick. Please forgive me. I don't have it with me right now at this very moment. But it's Deadly Rollick. On the Mox Field list, it's Deadly Rollick. Your commander just being 0 mana, there's no reason not to. And then the Grixis also has the best ones. There's like a top 3. It's easily these 3. Deadly Rollick. But obviously you want to play these if you want the deck to be super strong. Up to you. Viewer discretion. Now we're just going to go through the counter spells. So Swan Song, counter target spell, Mana Drain, Force of Negation, Force of Will. And that pretty much is all I felt like we needed. But we definitely have the elite counter spells in the deck. But I didn't want to get bogged down by playing Blue Path. I think 5 is enough, especially with how many wheels and everything else we have. I think that just having this amount is okay. It's enough to keep people's eyes peeled. It's not enough to slow down your entire deck and game plan, because when you play too many counterspells, a bunch of stuff just kind of happens and leaves you in the dust. So I think that's an appropriate amount. You can play more or less. This deck is all about your own self-expression, I feel like. This deck is definitely just a control shell with a polymorph package in it. So if there's anything you don't want to play, simply just don't. We have Dismember for some quick killing. It's just a second copy of Deadly Rollick against most decks. Most decks don't play creatures that are that big. And if they do, that's what Damnation's for. Impulse, one of the best cantrips ever created, besides the new one, the new Simic one, Planar Genesis. Yeah, talk about an upgrade. Soul Shatter. This is a card I like personally. It's very, very cheap. Last time I checked, if my memory serves me correctly. But it allows you to get each opponent's biggest fella. So it's like it's a very good multi-targeted, multifaceted removal spell. It definitely works super good. I haven't had any problems with this card. It performs every time I play it. It kind of surprises me. Tainted Pact is just one of those power level deciding cards. Although I wouldn't be too greedy with my Tainted Pact. You do need your big creatures. Don't want to run out of too many answers for things. And we play a good bit of basics. So I would just kind of keep your Tainted Pact. I'd be very liberal with what you pick. I don't think things need to be that crazy. I didn't want the deck to be like a super Tainted Pact deck. Because then you can also get effed. Because Polymorph might be at the bottom. It might be on the bottom of all your big creatures. So play with caution. Dark Ritual. It's Dark Ritual. We all know it. We all love it. Cyclonic Rift, of course. All know it. We all hate it. Mystical Tutor allows you to get Polymorph. And if you have the Polymorph, allows you to get answers to stop opponents. And then there's two very important cards that Mystical Tutor also works very well with that we'll get into. Narset's Reversal is just one of those cards that is always good, dude. Every deck, no matter how creature heavy, plays instants and sorceries. And just being able to put it back in someone's hand and then copy it, dude. Super fucking awesome. Super good. This card is nuts. It's tilting. This card is powerful. And you don't really see it talked about anymore since Brothers War. I remember Brothers War, it came out and it was a super big deal, man. But I'm looking at this thing. It's a very good card. It's very powerful. And I'm surprised more decks don't play it. I'm surprised you don't see it all the time. But that's just me. All right, so last but not least, we're going to get into the enchantments. So starting us off in the enchantment category, we have Counterbalance and Counterbalance. I just wanted a deck where I could play both of these. We play the Mystical Tutor. I was thinking about adding a Vampiric Tutor to this deck if I wanted to make it super sweaty. But we'll see how that goes. But it's whenever an opponent casts a spell, if the top card of your library matches the CMC, you get to cast yours for free. And Counterbalance is if it does the same matching thing, counters their spell. When you have both of these in play, it does work in the way that you'd like it to. You just trigger Counterbalance first, or second rather, so it resolves first, and then it'll counter their spell. Counterbalance does in fact remember the CMC of the spell, even though it's countered, and then you get your spell, and that's of course after you Mystical Tutor and whatnot. Sneak Attack, super busted card, we all know that it is, but it is very good for those times where you draw the big creatures, especially if you wanted to play something like a Blightsteel Colossus, or, you know, sometimes you draw your Tidespout Tyrants or Hullbreaker Horrors. It allows you to not have to pay 4 for your Polymorph. You get to just pay 1 red, slap them into play, and you can storm off, answering a lot of opponents' threats, setting them back to the Stone Age, all while you just keep your Sneak Attack. I love this card, especially in this deck. It might be a little out of place. It doesn't work with all the creatures. It also helps me play Mind Leech Mass, which is obviously not a very great phenomenal creature to have. You can play this with, like I said, Darksteel Colossus and the first edition of Ulamog. It's super good. We have Bitter Blossom. This allows us to have no shortage of blockers, no shortage of creatures to polymorph either. Super good card, and isn't that art just fantastic? Beautiful. Fable of the Mirror Breaker kind of does the same thing as Bitter Blossom. Costs a little more mana, but it allows you to ramp 2 and then rummage some cards away that you don't need. And plus, when you flip this guy over, it copies non-legendary creatures. So copying a Tidespout Tyrant or a Hullbreaker Horror the same way with Sneak Attack. Getting a 1-mana Hullbreaker Horror before you storm off. I think we all know and see how good that could be. Spiteful Banditry is a pretty good removal in the mid to late game because someone's playing probably a small creature deck, or, you know, nobody's creatures should be that big where Spiteful Banditry couldn't deal with it if we're talking that late in the game. But also, you could just play it on turn 2 and it just becomes a treasure creation engine, especially if one of your opponents is playing Aristocrats or otherwise, or just the course of the game, treasures being created. I'm very happy with this card. I think it's a good addition to the deck. Let me know what you think. Seal of Removal. I like Seal of Removal as a try because we can sacrifice it to beseech the mirror, and if we need to, just bounce someone's guy. You know, you ever been attacked with a Blightsteel Colossus? Oh, 0 mana, it goes back to your fucking hand. Stops you from being attacked from most things because you can very justifiably bounce someone's commander back to their sorry ass hand. So I think that this card, again, has surprised me. Just like a lot of cards in this list, evidently. But being able to just sort of not get attacked by people's strongest, toughest thing for 1 blue, and just kind of sitting around, nobody really wants to removal it, then yeah, I can get down with that. Rhystic Study, just because I wanted one in the deck. Obviously bullshit, obviously broken. Black Market Connections, being able to create that treasure and draw 2. Plus it allows you to create that 3/2 to polymorph in a pinch if your Rograhk costs more than 0 for whatever reason. You can get a creature for 0 mana if you need every ounce of mana to polymorph and protect your creature. And last but not least, Searcher Azcanta. It allows you to surveil through the top of your library, and when your graveyard's full enough, it becomes a land. Which, funny enough, when you select the non-creature spell, instead of drawing some of these big bad creatures, unless unfortunately you want to, it puts them at the bottom of the deck, so you don't have to worry about drawing into them or nothing. They'll always be there for polymorphs and Proteus staffs and everything good. So I like this card a lot. And that's just sort of the deck. This deck, like I said, was mostly to be a template for the strategy of play rather than a guidebook. So if there's anything you don't want to play, anything you want to play, man, just let me know what you liked and didn't like about this list. Tweak it to exactly how you want it. Shout out to Vensu. I love this deck box. It's double-sided, so I can put both of the commanders into the box, and they pop out on both sides. I freaking love this box, dude. Not sponsored, by the way, although I would totally love a sponsorship, Vensu. I love their product. I've started buying a bunch of these for my commander decks. And dude, that's so cool for partners. But other than that, I hope y'all had a good time watching this video. Let me know what you think.